It has a huge oversized puff sleeve option. It also has some little less statement-esque sleeve, a short sleeve with a gathered binding, and a long sleeve with a gathered binding. So it does have several options for us. It also has a dress version with several lengths, and then a shirt version. So I'm going to be making both a shirt and a dress, but we are going to start with the cropped length version of the shirt. And for the shirt, I am doing the short sleeve option. I saw a really cute eyelet button-up shirt in one of my favorite stores, and I was like, oh, I can totally make that. So that is why I have this beautiful white eyelet fabric. All right, let's get started. When you're working with woven fabric, it's essential to stay stitch. What is stay stitching? Great question. Stay stitching is just a single line of stitches around curved areas. So I always stay stitch necklines, waist curves, and arm size. So those are in any of the projects you're working on. It's always best as soon as you cut out your fabric, don't overly handle it, just carefully like go to the sewing machine and just sew along those edges, just to secure so that things don't stretch out, because woven fabric is notorious for warping or stretching. So you don't want distortion on your top. You want it to fit nicely and look as it is designed. So for that reason, I have already stay stitched. You probably can't see it because I'm using white thread, but I've done that both on my neckline and on my arm side, okay? I have done one placket just so you can see what it's supposed to look like. That's the wrong side. It's really nice though. Okay, and then on this one, I have made my marks. This is my seam allowance mark, that first line you see on your pattern piece. And then there's also the mark, this is on the wrong side. Let me just turn it over so you can see it better. Okay, so this is that inner mark, okay, the placket mark. So what we're going to do is we're going to press the seam allowance in along that line. You can draw it all the way down if you want. I marked it here and here, and then I use my pressing ruler. And then you want to fold over after we've pressed this down. Then we're going to fold it over at that line that you marked once more, like that. And then you're just going to stitch down. Then you're going to stitch down this edge here with an edge stitch. And then if you want, this is optional, you can also edge stitch right along the edge. I did both because I want this to look just really professional. So I'm gonna go do that on this other piece now, and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, we're going to take our back and our two yokes. You should have an outer and a liner. They can be the same fabric. That's preferable. It's just up to you what your design element is. And if you're using a fabric like this, it's very hard to tell the wrong from the right side. So just try to make sure you're consistent with like the way that your design looks. You are going to find your center. You can make a tiny snip there, like that. And when you do that, there's a snip right here. And then you can do the same thing with your bodice here. Just a tiny snip. You want to make sure your snips stay out of your seam allowance, okay? Because it's eyelet, it's a little difficult to see, but I know where it is, it's right there. And we are going to line up our snips right there. You also don't have to do that. You can just pin it, match it up, mark it, however you want. We're just gonna go across with our clips, just like that. Now we want to flip this over and we're gonna take our other piece. Now we're going to place this right side to the wrong side of your back. So we are just going to match up those center points and the ends. And then we are going to go sew across this with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Your seam should look like this. You have your 2 yoke pieces. If you pull them up, you'll see that your back falls nicely under that yoke. So we are going to go press this seam up toward the yoke, and then press it again once you lift up this other liner yoke, okay? Give it a good press, and then you can top stitch across it if you desire, and we're gonna be ready for the next step. All right, so it looks like that now. It's very nice. And now we're going to move on to the burrito roll method. Don't be scared, it just sounds complicated, but it's really not. And what it's gonna do is it's gonna neatly hide all of our seams at the shoulders and just really make this just a nice, crisp, professional top, okay? We're now going to do the burrito roll method, but we're gonna put both of our front pieces face up, so right sides up, facing us on your workspace. Then you're going to get your back piece, make sure you have the right side, and place that right side down facing your bodice front pieces. So you have right sides facing each other. The wrong side of your back piece should be facing you. Pull down this layer of lining from the yoke so that you just have the front main pieces, and you're going to align the shoulders starting at this edge, the shoulder edge, and working toward the neck, and then just clip in place. Okay. We are going to treat the bottom section of this pattern piece as one piece, okay? We're going to start to roll it at the bottom here. You can see I'm catching the front pieces. I'm rolling them up with this back piece into like a burrito, right? Like just rolling it up. You get to your back lining piece, you wanna lift it up because we actually want to roll under it. So, there it is. Okay, my rolled fabric is under my liner fabric. My fronts are facing and clipped. I'm gonna actually pick it up and flip it. Okay, now I see my liner here. Here are my front pieces clipped, right? And this is my roll. I am going to bring this liner piece up and over. You see that? To align at the shoulders. Like that, so that your burrito is in the middle of the 2 shoulders. And then you're just going to just open those clips and secure the shoulder seams together. Like that. Okay. Now we're gonna go over and sew our shoulder seam with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You wanna be careful to keep the rolled fabric out of the way while you're sewing. Take your time, you got this, and we'll meet right back here. It should look like this. We're going to go press the seam open, okay? And then we'll come back and we'll turn it right side out. All right, so now we're just gonna pull it out through one hole. And just be careful because you don't want to like pull any seams or anything, but as you pull, it will start to come out. Okay, So what that did was it locked our seam on the inside of the yoke at the back and at the shoulder. So it just gives it a really smooth look. If you're someone who hates having seams against you, this is an excellent option. Go give it a good press and you can top stitch here if you like. Now we're going to work on our collar stand. So we are going to have our collar stand that has interfacing on the back and our collar stand that doesn't. So we are going to just press up the hem of one of our pieces 3/8 of an inch all across the bottom like this to the wrong side. And we're just going to have that be our very first step. So I have my collar stand with the one end folded up 3/8 of an inch to the wrong side. Now I'm going to take my top and I want it right sides up, okay, and we're gonna just fold our top so that we can find the very center back here. And we're going to clip it like that. I'm gonna take the collar stand piece that isn't pressed and I'm going to use this long edge, which is kind of the bottom of the collar stand. I'm going to find the center and I'm going to clip that in place, right sides together to my bodice, like that. Okay, you can double check that you kept your center. And then you want to just clip this end here so that there's 3/8 of an inch that goes past your placket. And then you're just going to pin or clip this from the center back along the neckline evenly. Do the same on the other side. Go past it 3/8 of an inch, clip, and then walk your collar stand along the neckline and clip. Okay, so there you have it. If needed, you could run a little basting stitch maybe along the back neckline here and just bring in that neck just a little if you needed, especially if your fabric has stretched or warped, that may be needed. And then after you sew it, you will just remove those basting stitches. So now that we have this on here across, we are just gonna sew across the neckline in a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and just go slow as you go around the curves. You wanna make sure that your fabric is staying out of the way and that you're not causing it to pucker. All right, let's go do that. All right, your collar stand should now be on. You should have a seam here along the neckline, and then your collar stand on the right side should look like that. So what we're gonna do is go press the seam up toward the collar stand, and then we'll come back and we'll get our other collar stand pinned in place. Okay, we're actually going to just set this aside for now and get our collar pieces. All right, you should have one that is interfaced and one not interfaced. And we're actually just gonna put them right sides together. Now, we are going to pin and clip across the sides and the top. Then we're gonna go sew this with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Trim away the corner like that without cutting through your stitches, and then just trim down your seam allowance to about 1/4 of an inch all the way across. When you get to the corner, go ahead and ease pretty close to your stitches there just to get a nice corner, and then back out to the 1/4 of an inch. We want to leave our seam allowance down here alone. So just kind of go up from the middle of that. All right, let's go press this open and then we can top stitch. Your collar should look like that. Now we're going to top stitch around, up the side, across the top, and back down. Okay, now let's take our shirt, open it back up. Right, and we are going to place our collar right sides together with our collar stand. Okay, so you just want to match up these points with the right sides together. And then you just want to walk it across to the end. And then just clip evenly across. Now we're just going to go baste this in place just along the top edge here to secure it. With your collar stand up and away from the neckline and the collar itself down, like right along the edge of your collar stand, it's going down toward your bodice. Okay, we're just going to lay this flat and then we're going to find the center point. You can do that by just like folding in half like this and finding the point. And then do the same for your remaining collar stand. If you're not putting on the collar, that's okay. You would just omit the step of basting on the collar. Everything else remains the same. Also, I didn't add the collar piece itself to the collar stand first, like you can do, because I knew some people were going to not use the collar. So that is why I did my steps a little out of, not in the same line as the instructions for just that bit, but you can totally do it the instruction way and it's fine either way. All right, so then you're just going to match your centers and pin across. You want to match up this edge over here that you have, okay? And you want to keep your little folded seam allowance folded up. So when you stitch around here, we're going to stitch so that we secure that folded up section. Okay, so let's go sew around that with the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now we have our collar stand that was on top and the collar stand that's on the wrong side. We are going to trim our seam, but this is important. We don't want to trim the edge over here. We just want to trim from like the top of the curve around. And we're going to trim it down to about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure you don't cut the rest of your garment while you go around. You could also use pinking shears for this step. It would just add even more movement into the curve. Or when you're done trimming your seam, you can make little snips in toward the seam, like in toward your stitches, but not through them. And that will also help the curve to, lay, flat really nicely. Make sure you didn't miss any stitches. That's always important. Now, you are going to press this seam, or this up. So at the wrong side, we're going to press here, press your seam, and then you're going to flip over the ends on each side, that, and then we're going to just put pins in to secure all along our neckline here, so that when we sew it from the right side, it will have caught all of these edges. Okay, so let me go press that and we'll pin it. I'm going to put my pins on the right side, okay, because I want to make sure that I can kind of grab them as I'm sewing and remove them, but I'm looking from the wrong side because I want to make sure that my seam overlaps my seam allowance here really well, and that when I sew, I'm going to catch everything that I need to catch. I don't want to miss this edge That's why we're pinning it. So from the wrong side, it should look like this. From the right side, it should look like this, okay? We're going to go and we're going to just top stitch right along this edge, and you wanna make sure that you are catching the edge of your other collar stand on the inside, okay? So go slow, use your fingers to feel as you're sewing. You can always lift up and look, and you just wanna make sure that you catch that really well, okay? Okay, so this is what your collar should look like. You've got your collar, you've got your collar stand. The inside, it caught all of my edges properly. And if you didn't, that's okay. Just go back over and make sure you catch it. And then we can move to the next step. Make sure you give everything a really nice press. Now for this specific shirt, I am making the regular sleeve, short sleeve. It has a little gather at the top of the shoulder and also at the bottom of the sleeve. So this is our sleeve binding piece, and I'm only showing you one because you'll do the same things. So this is wrong side up. We're going to press in half long ways all across. Then we're going to use the middle press line and press each side toward that middle line on both sides, like that. So essentially, just like that. Then we're going to use that center fold again and press all the way in half and press. And so all the way across, you'll have a little binding piece, and they'll have all these little pressed lines. Should have 4. And we'll use those to sew the binding to the sleeve. So I'm gonna go press these and I'll be back. So your binding piece should look like this. And just open it up here, you'll be able to see the fold lines. Okay, so you have the 2 outer and then the center fold line, but technically you have 4 sections, 2 on each side of the fold line. Okay, so what we are going to do is then take one of your sleeves, and with the right side facing you, you want to take your with the right side facing, you want to. So now for our sleeves, we're actually going to run a gathering stitch about an inch, start about an inch from each end here, and then run that gathering stitch all across, and then end about 2 inches from the end of the other side, okay? So just evenly gather between these 2 sections, okay? And then you're gonna do that for both sleeves. Now, when we get back, we're going to be placing our binding on top of our gathered sleeve. It should be the same length by that point, okay? Okay, so we now have our 2 gathered sleeves. Put one aside and go ahead and get your binding piece, all right? So we're going to want to find the center of our binding piece. You can just fold it in half and then mark it. We want to find the center of our sleeve, but don't pull out your gathers. Just kind of gently find the center. Alternatively, you could have marked the center before you gathered it. So now that I have my pieces, what I'm gonna do is place my binding on top, but we actually are gonna unfold this line that we are currently using. So we are going to just line up the edges like this, right there. And then the same for your ends. Now obviously my machine gathered it a little too fabulously, so I'm going to have to loosen my gathers a little, but you just want to try to keep them even. And really the more in the center, it's cuter anyway, so if you want to kind of make this a little straighter, that's fine. And then once you have it where the gathers are correct, you can just make sure that they look nice and uniform. You don't want a bunch of gathers in one spot because then it'll look weird, so make sure you kind of evenly distribute them. Then you can pin or clip in place. Now we're gonna go sew right along this pressed seam that you can see here. Just sew right down this line. Keep the edges aligned as you do that. Okay? Do that for both sleeves. Your sleeve should look like this, the binding on it. We're gonna actually trim away the seam down a little. Just make sure you're keeping your sleeve out of the way. You don't want to cut that. Now we are going to further open up our bias tape. Okay, and we're going to match up the ends like this, starting with that binding. You want the seam from the sleeve to the binding to be pressed downward. That's important, so just clip it there and then just align the edge. If you're making the long sleeve, it's sewn the exact same way. So just be sure that you follow the same steps for my short sleeve. For the regular, all the regular sleeves are all sewn the same. We're gonna go and sew with a 3/8 of an inch inseam right here. Okay, so your sleeve should look like that. You're going to now finish the edge with pinking shears, with serger, whichever method you choose for the seam, okay? Because otherwise it'll fray and get all gross, and then we can do the next step. I'm gonna use pinking shears just so that you can see how you could finish it if you didn't have a serger. So you just use these handy dandy scissors. They were $8, and you just trim away some of that seam allowance along the edges, and now you have the serrated edge there and it doesn't fray. Now you can also do a zigzag stitch along each side. That would also secure it without a serger. But an overlock is what I would normally do on my serger. But with that seam pressed, you're gonna fold up your first line that you pressed in the beginning. Fold it all the way down, all the way around. Okay, and then you're gonna fold at the center. You want to enclose the seam right here that you reduced the height of, that you trimmed away. We wanna actually enclose that in our binding. So I am going to, just like I did for the collar stand, I'm gonna pin from the outside to the wrong side and then back to the outside again, because this will allow me to mess with my pins while I'm sewing, but it catches from the inside. And then you're just gonna evenly go around doing this. Okay, so when you have that pinned as much as you want, then it'll look like this. You can sew from this side if you want, but I prefer to sew from the right side. And I'm just going to stitch along this edge here to secure. So the hem of your sleeve will now look like that. And it should kind of be giving a lantern effect where it kind of comes a little bit in. But there's still a decent opening. We want our arms to be able to move freely all summer, or if it's long sleeves, you know, flow freely without feeling constricted. Woven fabric doesn't have a lot of stretch. Usually it has none, except for a few specific types. But we want to be able to move, right? We want to be able to have airy, breezy feels in the summer. So this sleeve was designed with that idea. All right, now, after you finish your other sleeve, we are going to grab our bodice and I'll show you how to insert your sleeve. So the first thing we need to do is to sew our sides. Okay, so we want to take our sides. We want our shirt to be wrong side out. Okay, and we're gonna lay it down. All right, I'm gonna match up the side seams. This is my front right side matching my back right side. Okay, so that both right sides are facing. I just match up my armpit. Okay. You're gonna sew down the sides using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and press, then finish the edge of your seam, just like we did for our sleeve seam. So overlock, pinking shears, or you can also use a zigzag stitch. Some methods so that your seams aren't going to fray. Now that we have our side seams done, your shirt should be looking a lot like a shirt now. So we have this nice oversized look. We are going to grab our sleeve, and with our sleeve, my markings, this is my 1 line for my front and 2 lines for my back. So it makes it easy to figure out where you need to go. Before we do anything, using those lines, I'm gonna run a gathering stitch from the front notch up and around to the back notch. Leave your strings long and don't gather it a lot yet, because you're going to actually adjust the gathers when we're clipping it to the shirt arm side. All right, when you're done, you should have a little bit of a gathered cap there. Now we're going to line up the side seam and the sleeve inseam just in clip. We are matching our front notch to the front bodice, and we're just gonna flip it so that we're inside out now. We've got the wrong side of the fabric out and our sleeve is inside the hole. Now we're just gonna pin, no stretching, up the side a little evenly, just like this, because this part won't be gathered. Okay, and as you can see, I need to gather more. I'm gonna just take my string, start pushing my gathers over. So you want most of these gathers to be concentrated evenly at the very top of the shoulder cap, because we want this to be where our gathers are. It's like right here on our shoulder. Okay, once it's clipped evenly around or pinned, and you've got all your gathers nicely at the shoulder cap evenly, then you can go sew around this with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so our seam looks like this. Our sleeve looks like that. Isn't that cute? So before you trim the seam allowance and finish it in your preferred method, I would suggest finishing both sleeves and trying on your top and making sure you like the fit, because if you need to make any personal adjustments, which is common in adult clothing, then I suggest now is the time to do it. So do take a look before you finish your seams. All right, after you do that, all you have left to do is hem and add buttonholes and buttons. So we are going to go ahead and press up 3/8 of an inch all along the bottom, and then press up again another 3/8 of an inch, and then we are going to stitch. And I like to do it from the front, so I pin and clip all around, and then I like to stitch it from here, from the top. Not everybody likes to do that, so if you're not comfortable with that or you don't like it that way, you can totally stitch it from the wrong side and it will still look nice. I just like doing it from the front. I think it gives a nice, really professional look. So as you're doing it from the front, if that's what you want to do, you can feel as you go to make sure that where your needle is going in, it's catching your hem, okay? So just take your time and sew in the method that you prefer, and then our hem will be done, and then we'll just have buttonholes and buttons. Okay, I'm ready to work on the dress. I have prepped some of it. We already did this shirt, which is so cute, right? Love it. So I just have to sew buttons on. Buttonholes are on, but I just have to put on the buttons still. Anyways, we are going to work on the big oversized puff sleeve, which is super exciting. I have it sewn on one side already. This is what your sleeve will end up looking like. It's just bold and beautiful and wonderful, right? So we're gonna work on the one that goes on this side, okay? So you are going to have your liner. This is your oversized puff liner, and this is the oversized puff. It is very big, okay? That is by design, so don't think you've done something wrong. We are going to mark the front and back. Back is red, front is green, just like in the tutorial. I did it on my liner as well. And then I marked the center of both of these. What we're gonna do first is run a gathering stitch along the bottom. I like to leave about 1 inch on each end, so I just gather right in between that. And we want to come back over and we want to gather it to the width of this liner sleeve. Okay, this is essentially what's kind of holding the sleeve together and making that kind of like scrunch in at the bottom and then give that dramatic puff, and then it gathers again at the shoulders. So I'm gonna go sew a gathering stitch across the bottom, and I'll come back and show you what we do next. All right, you wanna come back over. We want to now make these gathers the same width as this. I'm just gonna kind of lay it down and walk it along. Mine's pretty close. So I'm gonna just take some from over here and just kind of pull that straight. And we'll distribute the gathers evenly as soon as we have it the right. Okay, so that looks about right. So I am going to just move this clip for a second and just start to evenly move these gathers around until I feel like they look very uniform and there's not a bunch of gathers in just one section. We just want it to look nice and even all the way across. You can gather with your serger, or you can gather with your sewing machine with 2 basting stitches. My sewing machine has a gathering stitch, so that's why I just used 1 row, but you can definitely use 2 if that's what you feel comfortable with. So with your right side of your liner up and the right side of your sleeve up, we want to take our oversized sleeve and we are going to flip it over so it's right side's facing the right side of your sleeve. And we are going to just align it along the edge. Try not to move your gathers while you're doing this step. Just carefully clip it in place. I mean, you can always adjust them as you need, but it's better to try not to disturb them if you can. Now we're gonna go sew across this with our 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we are going to press this seam up toward our liner sleeve on the wrong side, and then edge stitch right along the edge. So we're gonna sew here, then we're gonna press this seam up toward our liner. Then with it open like this, we are going to edge stitch to secure the seam. There's our seam. This is the right side. We're going to edge stitch right along this edge on our liner. This just keeps it from pulling to the outside when you're done. This is what your sleeve looks like. Liner, main sleeve. Okay, we just want to fold it, right sides together, and we're going to line up the sleeve inseams over here. You want to make sure that these seams match up. Now we're going to go sew this seam here with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now you want to press this seam open and then finish the seam, and then finish the edges of the seam in your preferred method. You can use the pinking shears again, but you can use an overlock, you can use a zigzag stitch, whichever method you prefer. Or you could leave it raw because this will be on the inside of your sleeve, so even if it frays, it wouldn't be noticeable. Now we want to turn our sleeve right side out. Okay, this is what your sleeve should look like. You can trim away any loose strings. Now we are going to push this liner to the inside. Okay, so it should look like that from the bottom, and it will look like this on the top. So we are going to line up these seams here, just like that, and clip it. Now your front and back should still be marked. If a clip came off and you made your marks, you should still be able to find them that way. I always do both just in case. What we need to do for this step is to go to our sewing machine and we're gonna sew a gathering stitch from the front all the way around to the back notches that you made. Leave your liner alone. It's gonna be what we gather our oversized sleeve to, and this will all just kind of be together as one. Let's go sew that. Okay, now just want to pin your sleeve up like that to the first notches, and then we adjust our gather to match our liner piece here. Okay, and then once you have it the way you think it looks best, then we just want to kind of concentrate most of our gathers up at the sleeve cap, because that will give us the most poof, and that's what we're looking for. Okay, just pin or clip the rest of your sleeve. Try not to bother the gathers as you do this, so they stay nice. Okay, Now we're going to go and sew around our arm side, okay? And we're going to just baste this together right now. We just want it to be one layer, and then we will get it ready to go into the sleeve. Okay, so your sleeve should now be one unit. Okay, you can clip away your strings if you want, and we're going to get our bodice. With our bodice turned wrong side out, we are going to take our sleeve that's right side out, and we are going to match up the side seam of the bodice with the inseam of the sleeve, and then clip in place. They are both right sides together. The wrong side of your bodice, you can start to check your sleeve really quick. Now mine needs more gathers, and yours probably will too. So you're just gonna run a gathering stitch again, but this time it has both layers, just around that cap, okay? And then what we wanna do is have most of our gathers here at the shoulder with just a few ending by the time we get to the yoke in the back. It's gonna start a little before the shoulder, like that, and then ending right about your yoke, okay? So go ahead and do that gathering stitch. Okay, now just like before, we line up the right sides together, side seam with sleeve inseam, clip in place. You can clip up a little ways on each side of your sleeve, front and back. Then you want to find your new gathering stitches and just kind of start to work them up and around. You can kind of look at your other sleeve to see where your gathers begin and kind of adjust that so that they match up. Okay, now when you have that the way you want it, we're gonna go sew around this with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then you'll have your bodice pretty much done. The other thing you should note is you should try this on. This is what I did. I tried on my top, okay? And then starting with the center bust button, because that's where you have the most stress and you don't want it to pop open the most, you will make a dot. Okay, so I made a dot here. I hope you can see it, it's blue. So on this one, it's this dot, okay? And then I did this, and I made sure that it was all the way at the bottom. I made sure they matched up, and I kind of decided where I wanted my last bottom one to go, and I made a dot there. So that's like this one. So now I have this one and this one. So then what I did to find the others is I folded this together like this, and in the center I made a dot. Now they're evenly spaced. Okay, then I did the same thing here and made another dot to find this one. Now I could easily put another one at the very top if I want, but I didn't think after trying it on that I would ever want to wear it all the way buttoned up. So I feel like this one that's going to be right here, the last one, will be enough for me. So you can adjust them as you like, but that's the best way to get the buttons correct on your body. You can use the pattern layout, that's fine, but I just find that if you put it on yourself and you put the button first where you know you need it most and then adjust evenly, it just looks so much better on you. Okay, so I made those dots. These are for my buttons, and on this side I already did my buttonholes, and I have on my top as well. So all I did to do that was I just laid this like that, and then I overlapped, matching the bottom up and the top up, make sure they were even. And then I just lifted and made a mark, and lifted and made a mark until I had all my marks transferred. And then I just made sure that they were centered when I did my buttonhole. So let's go sew this sleeve. Okay, try it on and see what you think. So I told you these sleeves were huge. Are they not amazing though? Oh my gosh. Oh, I just love them. Anyway, so you want to try it on and see if you like it. If you like it, then you want to finish the seams on the inside. Again, pinking shears, zigzag stitch, your serger using an overlock stitch. Those are your best methods for finishing the seam. All right, now we're going to move on to the skirt and adding the pockets. You should have 2 sets of mirrored pockets. Okay, so we have the 2 on each side. I have went around all of the pockets with my pinking shears to finish the edges. You can go around with a serger, or you can use a zigzag stitch, and you want to do that before we do the next step. So that's why that's already done. Then you want to mark on your top skirt piece where the pockets should go. And then you're going to take your pocket and you're going to place it right sides together, right at that mark on both sides. But you want to make sure you use like one of the mirrored sets, not your actual set. Okay, just like that. Clip in place. Now repeat with your other piece here. Okay, so now we're going to go sew down each side to secure it, just to baste it on. Okay, so then we're going to be able to put our pieces right side up together and go around. But for now, we're going to go sew all 4 of these pockets on. Okay, now that you've done that, you want to take both top skirt pieces and we are going to place them right sides together. I have kind of bunched up this piece so you can see it and the pockets. So just know that it's longer than what it appears to be. You just want to line up the sides like this. And then what we are actually going to do is sew down here with our needle in, we lift our presser foot and pivot, turning our fabric, and then we go around the pocket, and then we want to pivot again, go across, and then pivot again and come down. Okay, so we want to make sure that this pocket stays nice. Remember, you're using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, do that on the other side as well. Okay, now we're going to go sew just like I explained on each side. So now you want to finish your seam along the edge here, and then we are going to press open our sides. So you can see it's already understitched here before we sewed the sides together, just across where our pocket was after we pressed it to the wrong side. And now we're gonna go press really nicely right here, okay? Both sides. Okay, so if you did the pocket, your seam would look like this. If you didn't do the pocket, then you just have a nice straight seam. Okay, so now we are going to grab the bottom tier for me. I'm doing the above knee dress, so I cut the top and the bottom, the above knee. Okay, so this is the first mirrored section because it's cut to mirrored. So I have 4 pieces like this, 2 mirrored sets, and this is the center seam and this is the side seam, and I have them right sides facing. Okay, and we're going to clip down here and sew with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we will press open that seam and then finish the seam edges however you choose. Then we will do the sides. The seam should look like that, or finished however you chose, and then pressed nice and open. And this is the front or back depending on which one. And we're going to just go do the same thing to the other piece and then place them right sides together and sew the side seams with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So the next thing you want to do is make sure you have it the right way. So as I'm looking at this, it curves up this way, which means that's the bottom. So I just want to find the same. Okay, so I think that's this way then. Yep. You want to make sure you have right sides facing when you put this together, and make sure that the gentle curve matches when you put them together, because if you put them sides facing but the direction is not correct, it's going to look really wonky. So make sure this gentle curve is following on both sides. This is the bottom. This little curve here is the top. Okay, and if you want, it might be smart to mark that. Like, this is the top. I'm gonna use my red clip here. That's the top, okay? You can do it however you want, but just a suggestion. I don't know if you noticed, but I added buttons. I had to go to, my youngest daughter had her final day of school bash today, so I wanted to wear this really cute new top, and so I sewed my buttons on pretty quick in between. So it looks great. It did great out and about, so I hope you love yours too if you made the top. Okay, let's go sew this with the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. We'll have the whole bottom done, and we will want to press up the hem. We're going to press up to the wrong side 3/8 of an inch, and you can use one of these great seam guides, and then you just like set it to 3/8 of an inch seam allowance with this red slider, and you can just, you know, do it that way. I have a ruler that I use when I press that shows me all of the seam allowances that I might need. And so I'll just use that as I go around. And then after you've pressed it up once, you'll press it over again another 3/8 of an inch. And then we'll actually sew the hem so that it's all done, because it's easier to do the hemming now than when it's all together in the big dress and you're like wrestling the big sleeves and all of the parts. So, okay, your hem should look like this. And you're just going to sew. I like to sew from the right side and feel for my hem, and so just so that it catches right on the edge here. But you can sew from the wrong side if you want and just edge stitch right along that all the way around to hem it. Let's do that now, and then I'll meet you back over here. All right, and now that your hem is complete, we're gonna run a gathering stitch all across this top edge so that we can gather it to the top skirt piece. Okay, so I'm gonna just use my sewing machine's gather stitch, but you can either run 2 basting stitch rows across the top and then pull 1 to gather. And if you break it into 2 sections, like if you did this section in a row of stitches and this section in a row of stitches that are separate from one another, it's a little easier to gather and get it even without having to go around the whole piece. That's just an option too. You can do it however you feel best, but we just need to gather it evenly to the top part of our skirt. Now, to find our ends, just kind of line it up so that you have the middle centers with the ends. Okay, and now we're gonna go get our skirt piece and adjust our gathers so that they are the same width. This is the top of my bottom skirt piece for the above knee version. And this is the top skirt, but this is the bottom hem of that. Okay, and that's what we want to get this to be even with. Okay, so looks like I just need a couple more inches. So go back to where I had that. Just gonna pull off. Let's see, I can adjust my gathers once I get this the right width. A little bit less. My sewing machine did a good job. All the gathers. Okay, now let's try it. Almost. Okay, so now we just want to evenly distribute all of the gathers. You gotta kind of check as you go to make sure that you're still keeping it consistent. You don't want a bunch of uneven gathers. So because mine kind of came out here, I'll probably have to run another gather stitch underneath just to kind of be able to fix that part. Let's just see where we're at with our skirt piece. Problem is that's just about right, which means I need to loosen my gathers a bit more so that I can have an even bit here. Just need it just a touch wider. Okay, so now you're going to place your skirt piece. I'm going to turn it wrong side out so you can see the seams, okay? And I'm just going to figure out where my center is. I think I should probably mark that better next time. So this is the center. So this is the side. So we want to match up a side with another side seam here. Same for the other side. Now find the quarter of each of your top skirts by just folding it in half. Okay. And then you want to align the center seam with that center point on the bottom of your top skirt. Like that. And then you want to repeat that for the other side. But I'm going to go ahead and just pin my skirt here while I go. You can adjust your gathers as you're going. If you see that any of them tend to have, you know, more or less gathers all in one spot. Now find the center of the other side and then repeat that. Okay, when that's done, you should have it like this, and we're gonna sew around this skirt with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we're going to press the seam up toward the top skirt and top stitch all around. Now I have the skirt sewn and pressed, and the seam is finished with the pinking shears. Okay, you can remove your basting stitches, and now we're gonna just top stitch along here, and then we will gather the top edge of our skirt. Okay, so I'm grabbing my bodice, and we are going to overlap the bottom edge, just like if it were sewn in the placket or it was buttoned up. So we're just overlapping the placket fold, and we can pin or clip in place, and we are going to go baste that so we have a nice circle. So we have a nice hem that we can use to sew the skirt. While you're at it, you could quarter your bodice hem. So that means like align the side seam, pull out on the edges, and then mark the center back. And the center front is already marked with my basting, and then you'll know both sides, okay? Okay, so now that you have your bodice hem ready to go, we're gonna set it aside, and we're gonna go make the gathering stitch along the top part of our skirt in your preferred method. Okay, just like we did before, we want to see if we need to adjust our gathers. It's getting a little bit difficult with it being so big. Okay, and I'd say just a tiny smidge I do. We will go with that and see what we need to do to get them on. So now we're gonna take our bodice and we're going to place it inside our skirt with right sides together. And then you want to align the side seams. That'll be where your pockets are, just in case you're not sure which one is the side seam. And then clip or pin in place all around, and then distribute your gathers evenly from there. Once you have this pinned and your gathers evenly distributed, we want to sew around this with a 1-inch seam allowance, not a 3/8, because the whole purpose of this is to make a casing so that we can put in elastic. Now, even if you're not sewing the casing version, you're still going to use the 1-inch seam allowance and then trim down the seam allowance, okay? That's just the best way to reduce having so many different patterns. So we're all going to sew with a 1-inch seam allowance all the way across, and when you're going, because of your gathers, you don't want them to like get like this and get folded over and get caught, right? So you wanna keep them evenly distributed while you're doing your sewing at the 1-inch, and just really kind of keep that in mind as you're going around, okay? I'm gonna do the elastic version, which means after I sew that, I am going to trim away just from the bodice, the seam allowance down to like about 1/4. And that's gonna reduce the bulk that we have when we press the seam up and make our casing. Okay, so sewing is the first step. I'm just trimming away the seam allowance from the bodice because we are going to put our elastic in here and we don't need both seam allowance. So don't cut out your skirt seam allowance, we need that one. Just this bodice one. Now, we are going to press our seam up toward our bodice. Okay. Whew. Now we're going to press our seam up toward the bodice, and then we are going to sew around the top edge of the skirt. seam allowance here. You can do it from the inside, that's fine. And you're going to make sure you keep your placket overlapped evenly as you go. If you need to pin it all the way up, that's fine. But we're just gonna sew right along the top edge. From the right side, that's gonna be about this high up. You can feel where your seam is, and that is about where it'll be. Now, we are going to leave about an 1 to 2 inch opening. Probably on a side would be the best. About an 1 to 2 inch opening, probably on a side would be the best. And you'll just start your stitches, go around, and then stop about 1 to 2 inches and back stitch really well on both spots so that you can insert the elastic into the casing, and then, you know, then we can close it up after, but we'll start with leaving our opening to make that easier. Okay, we'll do that. You will be sewing along your finished edge to make your casing. Insert your elastic into your opening, thread around the waist and out the other side. Overlap the edges and sew to secure. Stretch the elastic waist to pull it inside and finish the opening. Now let's move on to our buttons. You will have a button for each spot that you marked, as I showed you previously in the video. Thread a needle with thread of your choice that matches your garment, tie a knot in the end, and you can either go in through the back of the garment at your marking, or you can even just dip in through the top, depending on your preference. And then you're going to go through the back hole of your button, just like that. Pull your thread all the way tight and go back down through the other buttonhole. If you have 4 buttonholes, you'll want to go top to bottom and then left to right to secure it, and then repeat this several times until you feel that the button is secure. To tie off the button, you want to make a knot at the back of your garment or where you started your needle through, and just make a couple good knots. Then you can trim away the excess threads after you're sure that the button is nice and secure. And then repeat this for each of your buttonholes. Thank you so much for sewing along with me. I hope you had a good time, and I hope you love the way your shirt or dress or both turned out. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share, and I hope that you will join me back here to sew with me again very soon. Until next time.